Tonight, we're going to take a slow look at the story of the Wraith. In Dead by Daylight, Philip Ojomo is one of the quietest tragic figures in the entire game. He is not loud. He is not theatrical. He is not built around ancient curses or dramatic personal revenge. Instead, his story is built around exploitation, deception, class power, and the moment an innocent man realizes that his ordinary work has been helping erase human lives. That is what makes him so sad. Philip does not begin as someone violent. He does not begin as a predator. He does not begin as a man looking for blood. He begins as someone trying to survive, someone displaced, someone who enters a hard world and tries to believe that honest labor, however ugly, can still mean something stable. And that belief is exactly what gets turned against him. So in this video, we are going to go through the story of the Wraith slowly. We will talk about Philip's life before the scrapyard, the vulnerability of migration, the hidden machinery of exploitation, and the terrible moment when the truth finally reached him. This is meant to be calm, slow, something you can let play quietly. So settle in, and let's begin at the start. Part 2. Philip before the scrapyard. Before he became the Wraith, he was Philip Ojomo. And like several of the saddest killers in Dead by Daylight, Philip begins not from power, but from exposure. He is a person the world can use. A worker, an immigrant, a man looking for a place to stand. That matters. When people move across borders looking for work, safety, or a future, they often carry hope, but they also carry vulnerability. They may not have strong local protections. They may not know who can be trusted. They may need income badly enough to accept harsh conditions. And all of that makes exploitation easier. That is the emotional position Philip occupies. He is not walking into a fair system where labor is respected and dignity is secure. He is walking into a world ready to convert need into obedience. At first, that might not feel dramatic. It may simply look like work, hard work, loud work, dirty work. But when a person is trying to survive, ordinary work can feel like a gift, even when it is brutal. A paycheck can look like stability. Routine can look like safety. Even a miserable job can feel better than uncertainty. That is part of why Philip's story hurts so much. He is not seeking darkness. He is trying to build a life. Part 3. The scrapyard and the appearance of ordinary labor. Philip eventually finds work at an auto scrapyard. And on the surface, this is not some gothic horror setting. It is industrial, practical, noisy, ugly in a familiar way. Cars come in. Metal is stripped. Machines grind and crush. A worker shows up and does what he is told. That is the setting. And because it looks so ordinary from the outside, the horror underneath it becomes even more effective. A scrapyard is already a place of broken things. Wrecked frames, twisted metal, abandoned usefulness. So in a symbolic sense, it is a perfect place for hidden violence to live. Because destruction there looks normal. Because what enters the yard is expected to be ruined already. That is what makes the later revelations so severe. The environment trained Philip to read collapse as routine, to see wreckage as just another part of the job. And inside that normality, something monstrous was hidden. Part 4. The hidden bodies. The central horror of Philip's story is that cars arrive at the yard with bodies hidden inside them. People have already been murdered elsewhere, placed inside the wrecks, and sent through the system so that the evidence can disappear. Philip, without knowing it, becomes part of that process. That is one of the most disturbing setups in Dead by Daylight. Not only because murder is involved, but because innocence becomes entangled with it through labor. Philip is not asked whether he wants to participate. He is not told the truth clearly and given the chance to refuse. He is used. That word matters. Used. His effort, his body, his time, his need for employment. All of it is converted into a tool for erasing other human beings. That is an especially dark form of exploitation, because it does not only steal labor, it steals moral agency. It forces a person into complicity without consent. And by the time the truth becomes visible, the damage is already done. Part 5. The boss and practical evil. The man running the scrapyard understands what he is doing. That is important, because Philip's story is not about an accidental misunderstanding. It is about a structure built deliberately by someone who knows how to turn vulnerable people into instruments. This kind of villainy is especially ugly because it is so practical. No ritual, no spectacle, No need for grand declarations. Just a cold understanding that workers can be manipulated, that people who need jobs will ask fewer questions, that systems of power are easiest to maintain when the people at the bottom never see the full picture. That is what makes Philip's boss so disturbing. He represents a kind of evil that does not need hatred to function, only calculation. He knows exactly how much truth to hide, exactly how much labor to demand, exactly how ordinary everything must appear for the machine to keep running. That is not dramatic evil. It is administrative evil, economic evil, the kind that looks almost boring until you realize how many lives it has already helped destroy. Part 6. What ordinary work can hide. One reason the Wraith story lands so well is that it taps into a fear deeper than many people first realize. The fear that ordinary life can hide atrocity. Not every horror story has to be about the unknown forest or the haunted house. Sometimes horror is a workplace, a time card, a supervisor, a routine that only later reveals what it was actually doing. That possibility is terrifying because it means a person can be trying to live honestly while unknowingly helping something monstrous continue. Philip's story is built entirely around that terror. He is not morally asleep in the sense of not caring. He is structurally prevented from seeing enough. And when you do not have power and you need the work, and the environment itself encourages numb repetition, hidden truth can survive for a long time. That is what makes the whole thing feel so bleak. The system around him is designed to keep him functional, not informed. Part 7. The moment of discovery. Eventually, the truth breaks through. Philip discovers one of the bodies hidden in a car, and in that instant, the entire meaning of his life at the scrapyard changes. This is the real turning point, not because it introduces horror for the first time, but because it forces recognition. Everything before this moment can no longer remain what it seemed. Every shift becomes contaminated in memory. Every machine becomes complicit. Every order from above becomes sinister. Try to imagine what that realization would feel like. The shock of seeing a body, the understanding that this cannot be the first one, the immediate awareness that your own hands have been part of something you would never have chosen knowingly. That is devastating. Not only frightening, not only disgusting, devastating, because it attacks a person's sense of themselves. Philip was trying to work, trying to survive, trying to remain within the moral shape of ordinary life. And suddenly, he learns that the ordinary life he thought he had is a disguise over mass corruption. That kind of revelation can break a mind open. Part 8. Guilt, rage, and moral collapse. Once Philip knows the truth, he cannot unknow it. And that may be the saddest part of all. If he were cruel by nature, the revelation might not matter very much. If he were already numb to suffering, he might just continue. But he is not written that way. Philip feels like the kind of person who can be shattered by moral knowledge. He now has to live with several truths at once. He has been exploited. He has been lied to. He has unknowingly helped destroy evidence of murder. And he cannot return to innocence. That combination creates a very specific kind of collapse. Guilt, revulsion, rage. The sense that your own body has been used for evil. That is not easy to survive psychologically. And Dead by Daylight does not pretend it would be. Instead, it lets the pressure break him. Part 9. Killing the boss. When Philip confronts his boss, the confrontation ends in violence. He kills him. And again, what matters here is not simple approval or condemnation. What matters is understanding the emotional shape of the act. This is not framed like a joyful embrace of murder. It feels like rupture, like a person pushed past the edge of what he can contain. The exploited worker finally seeing the architect of his exploitation. The deceived man finally facing the person who made deception profitable. The horror finally receiving a human face. That would be a lot for anyone. For Philip, it becomes the final break. After this, there is no path back to the person he once was. Even though his victim was a murderer, even though the system around him was monstrous, the act still changes Philip irreversibly. He crosses a threshold. And what makes the story tragic is that he crosses it through revelation, not desire. He becomes violent because the world he trusted turned out to be built on hidden violence already. Part 10. Why the Wraith looks the way he does. The final image of Philip as the Wraith works so well because it does not look like empowerment. It looks like torment made physical. He is thin, stretched, almost flayed. His body feels less like a warrior's form and more like a person stripped down to pain. That is exactly right for him. Philip is not a killer who should look triumphant. He is a killer who should look used up. Like someone whose humanity was peeled away layer by layer until only anguish and function remained. The design communicates that beautifully. He is not ornate, not grand, not regal. He is the shape of a person who survived too close to hidden atrocity and came out of it damaged beyond repair. Part 11. The Bell and What It Means. The wailing bell is one of the strongest symbolic objects in Dead by Daylight. A bell announces something. It marks presence. It marks transition. It says, pay attention, something is arriving. That is fitting for Philip. He is a character defined by hidden truth becoming visible too late. The bell feels like the sound of revelation turned ritual, the warning that what was unseen is now here. The note that says concealment has ended, but only for a moment, and only because it is already too close. That makes the bell more than a gameplay detail. It becomes part of the emotional identity of the character. Part 12. Invisibility and Hidden Violence. The Wraith's invisibility is also perfect for his story. Not just because stealth is scary, but because it expresses the entire logic of Philip's past. He lived inside hidden violence, worked inside hidden violence, was used by hidden violence. Only later did he understand what had been moving under the surface of his ordinary life. So now he becomes the form of hidden horror himself. The thing not seen clearly until it is almost upon you. The truth beneath appearances. The threat behind routine. That is elegant writing and elegant design working together. Philip was once the one kept in darkness. Now he is darkness moving through other people's certainty. Part 13. Why his story is tragic. What makes Philip tragic is not only that bad things happened around him. It is that his attempt to live honestly was turned into part of the machinery of evil. That is a very specific wound. He is not someone who chose cruelty as a philosophy. He is someone who discovered too late that the world had already arranged his labor into a structure of cruelty without his knowledge. That destroys more than safety. It destroys trust. In work, in routine, in the meaning of one's own effort. And once that trust is gone, what remains is not simply rage. It is despair. That despair is everywhere in the Wraith. In the body, in the sounds, in the whole shape of the character. Part 14. The Entity and Another Machine. When the Entity takes Philip, there is something especially bitter about it. Because Philip's whole life has already been shaped by systems larger than himself. Systems that use him. Systems that conceal truth. Systems that keep functioning regardless of the human cost. And now the Entity folds him into another one. Another machine. Another cycle. Another structure of endless violence and function. That is bleak in a very clean way. He escapes one apparatus only to become part of another. Not free in life. Not free in death. The exploited worker becomes the eternal instrument. Part 15. Slow ending and reflection. So in the end, the Wraith is not just an invisible killer with a bell. He is the final shape of betrayal made systemic and personal at the same time. Philip Ojomo began as a man trying to survive through honest work. And by the time the world revealed what that work had really been serving, the damage to his moral life was already severe. That is what makes him memorable. Not only the stealth, not only the design, but the sadness beneath it all. He is a person who learned too late that ordinary life can hide extraordinary evil. A person whose innocence was not mocked, but used. A person who crossed into violence only after truth itself became unbearable. That is the full story of the Wraith. Or at least, the slow version of it.